So welcome to the TESOL course at Southern Utah University. In this unit we'll talk about reading and talk about different approaches to reading. We'll first start off with the importance of reading and then talk about challenges that readers face. Then we'll talk about two different approaches, the intensive and extensive reading and both the top-down and bottom-up processing. As we talked about previously, reading is one of the written language skills. It's also one of the receptive language skills. So reading is important. It matters. The most important uses of reading is communication and learning. And the fact is, lots of learning happens through reading, just like lots of learning happens through listening. Only reading is possibly even more important in an academic environment, that the majority of what we learn is through the things that we read, both things about language and things about other topics. One of the benefits of that is that the better and the more we can read, then the more independent we are in terms of our ability to decide what we learn and how we learn and when we learn. So reading gives people that independence. But there's lots of challenges that readers face. One of them is the difference between oral language and written language. Written language is often more formal. The structures are more complex. Sometimes has different vocabulary and grammar. The register of written language is often different than what we generally see in oral language. There are some advantages to reading when you can already read in your first language. And so that L1 literacy can transfer to the L2. But if a learner does not have literacy in their native language, then they really struggle with reading in that second language. Especially if there's a different alphabet system or character or symbol system. If they're not familiar with the English or the Roman alphabet, then they've got a lot of learning to do in order to be ready for reading. Reading requires an enormous vocabulary base in order to be able to handle and process the kinds of texts that you readers interact with. And of course there's a cultural and an affective aspect of reading. Some cultures don't value reading. They view spoken language as primary, and so learners may have to get over that hurdle or that bias. They may not have had good experiences in the past with reading, and so they may have an affective filter that's blocking them from being open and interested in reading. So those are things that they will also face. When we think about ways to help people with reading, we can think about intensive and extensive reading. So intensive reading is something that's usually done in the classroom, and the focus here is on meaning, communication, on developing skills, or accomplishing tasks. This is the kind of teaching people how to read and find information. Extensive reading is often done outside of the class. The focus here is pleasure, enjoyment, and also building fluency. Both kinds of reading are really important to developing strong readers. We need to teach them some skills and build their skills in class and practice with them, but then they need to do lots and lots and lots and lots of reading outside of class that is easier reading, that's at their level, that doesn't challenge them as much, but builds their positive attitude about reading, their motivation, and then helps them read more quickly. When we think about approaches to reading, we want to contrast both something called bottom-up processing with top-down processing. And we've talked about this before with listening. It's similar in reading. Bottom-up processing in reading is being able to look at the letters, the symbols, the graphemes, and make sense of what sounds those represent and then what words those represent. And the more we read, the more we're going to start not having to use that bottom-up processing as much. We're not going to have to recognize every character, piece it together into a word. We'll start recognizing sight words. We'll get faster. We'll start recognizing even blocks of text or chunks of text together, and we'll get faster. Top down, similar to with listening, it's using our background knowledge, our schema awareness, to try and better understand text, predict what's going to happen, what's the structure to be like, anticipating what's going to come next, and then using those approaches together, and that's called interactive processing. And really, any good reader is using both bottom-up and top-down processing when they're doing reading. So we talked about why reading matters, but it's a challenge, and then we talked about contrasting intensive and extensive reading along with top-down and bottom-up processing.